In East London in the 60s, the Kray twins are the gangster princes of the city and everyone is terrified of them. Ron is bloodthirsty and illogical, while Reggie is a street-fighting man. One morning, Reggie leaves the house to bring tea for the policemen who have been tailing him. He mocks Nipper for sitting there doing nothing instead of catching the real criminals. Then Reggie goes to his car and finds his friend Albie instead of his driver Frank. Albie explains that Frank hasn't shown up for work, so Reggie decides to go to his apartment to find out what happened. On the way, Reggie talks to all the neighbors, who like how much he cares. The cops continue to follow him and Nipper gets angry because civilians choose to talk to a gangster but not to the police. At the apartment, Reggie meets Frank's sister Frances and flirts with her until her mother sends her back inside. Eventually Frank comes out and finally gets to work. During the trip, Reggie keeps asking Frank things about Frances. Eventually they stop by an alleyway, where Reggie and Albie quickly sneak away. Nipper stops the police car too and tries to follow them, but no matter how fast he runs, he loses track of them. Afterward Reggie and Albie visit Ron, who is in a mental hospital. He served 3 years in prison for grievous bodily harm but eventually was declared insane. Ron tells them a story about using mind powers to force people to give him their food and the duo pretends it's fascinating. Reggie is desperate to get his brother out, so he sends one of his men to threaten the psychiatrist in charge of Ron's evaluation. The doctor is so terrified after hearing Reggie's name that he tells the parole board that Ron is healthy now and can be released. After the paperwork is done, the doctor privately warns Reggie that Ron is a psychopath and gives him some medicine that Ron must take twice a day to avoid trouble. Sometime later Frances gets ready for a date with Reggie and ignores her mother's disapproval. Reggie takes her to the club he owns, explaining that he invites both celebrities and criminals because his clients love the mix. The date is interrupted when Reggie's men take him to another table because there's something important that needs his attention. It turns out that Jack has been stealing some of the money he gets from selling illegal substances as part of Reggie's operation. To Jack's surprise, Reggie forgives him as long as he brings the money back tomorrow and promises not to steal again. Reggie even gives him a cigarette, only to then hit Jack and threaten to kill him if he does something stupid again. Then Reggie returns to the date and tries to bond with Frances. She asks him if he enjoys being a gangster and he pretends he isn't. Instead he says he's just a club owner. He gives a funny speech about the state of the world and Frances kisses him. A few weeks later, Reggie takes Frances to the forest so he can introduce her to Ron, who is living in an RV. Frances notices another guy leaving the RV so Ron explains he likes men. In fact he shares too much information about his taste in the bedroom. He also mentions that he and Reggie will rule the whole city soon. The Kray twins have a rivalry with the torture gang from South London. The leaders are brothers Charlie and Eddie Richardson. They hang victims by their feet and painfully torture them until they give them the information they want. Today they're very angry because they've found one of Reggie's men operating on their side of the river, so they send a car to run over Reggie as a warning. In revenge, Reggie sends an even bigger car to crash into the restaurant where the Richardsons are having lunch. Tired of this fight, the Richardsons send George to visit the Krays and invite them to neutral ground so they can settle things. George insults Ron and causes him to take out his gun, so Reggie sends him away. An hour later the twins go to the meeting at a pub, only to be surrounded by the rival gang since this was a trap all along. Ron starts ranting with his hands in his jacket pockets, pretending he has guns while asking for a shootout. The enemies are freaked out by Ron's crazy face and the guns, so they let him leave. During all this, Reggie just keeps pouring a glass of beer. After his brother is gone, he starts insulting the gangsters and reveals he's brought brass knuckles. At the same time Ron comes back with 2 hammers and hits an opponent on the back. A fight ensues and even though the torture gang has more fighters, the Krays are absolute savages. They beat up every man without mercy and Ron even bites someone's face. The twins easily win the battle and while Ron keeps hitting the unconscious men, Reggie drinks his beer. On the day of the World Cup final, the cops find Charlie in the gang hideout and arrest him. He gets sentenced to 25 years for fraud, extortion, and assault. Now there's nobody left to stop the Krays from taking over London. They hire a lawyer named Leslie, who helps them set up legitimate business operations to cover their illegal ones. Leslie uses intimidation through words and the law to convince the owner of the local casino to sell it to the twins. Reggie likes Leslie and considers him useful, but Ron doesn't trust him. He dislikes how Leslie gets things done by negotiating like a businessman because he thinks that's being a sneaky scammer, when a gangster should actually be direct and rough. Ron also hates how Leslie keeps saying we as if he was part of the Krays. One day Leslie informs the twins that the American Mafia wants to do business with them. Ron isn't interested in working with them but Reggie makes Leslie set up a meeting. The situation is tense and Reggie isn't impressed at first, however the Americans have brought a suitcase full of money and another one full of bearer bonds. The Americans are asking for a business deal and for the profits to be divided 40-60, however Reggie asks for 50-50. His offer is accepted and they make a toast to celebrate. Ron accidentally starts talking about his private life again but the Americans laugh, calling him brave for admitting those things. As days pass, the casino's success continues to grow and establishes Reggie's cover as a legitimate businessman while he still does dirty business behind closed doors. Just like his pub, the casino is filled with both celebrities and criminals to attract the curious and edgy crowd. Reggie continues to date Frances and Ron keeps on being eccentric, to the point of bringing a donkey to the casino. The medicine keeps him calm but hasn't really cured him. The end of the year approaches and Reggie has to return to prison to finish out a sentence that had been on appeal. As soon as Reggie steps into prison, the guards brutally beat him up before taking him to his cell. All the other prisoners see him and shout encouraging words. However, Reggie is in terrible pain and when he reaches his cell, he begs for mercy. A cop brings him water and Reggie reveals he's been acting by stealing his handcuffs. After cuffing the guard to the bars, Reggie takes his baton and hits him while the other prisoners cheer for him. A few days later, Ron tells Frances that he's seen Reggie and he sends his regards, but he doesn't want her to visit him. Afterward, Ron meets with Leslie and keeps asking for money for some ridiculous ideas. It seems that since his brother went to jail, Ron has slowly been losing it. He and Leslie have the same argument every day and eventually Ron snaps, throwing Leslie's papers off the table. He's tired of being a businessman, he just wants to be a gangster who takes the money he needs whenever he feels like it. A tired Leslie promises to try something with the bank, but also reminds Ron that he isn't afraid of him. Meanwhile, Frances goes to visit Reggie, who isn't happy about her ignoring his message because he doesn't want her to see him like this. Frances wants to report the guards who are abusing him, so Reggie has to explain to her how the corrupt system works. She wishes he would leave the criminal life behind, but he says it's not that simple. At the club, Ron interrupts a performance by badly playing an instrument. Then he takes over the microphone to mock his rich clients for their fancy lives, telling obscene jokes in the process. Nobody laughs except for his assistant Teddy, and Leslie worries about the possible consequences. Eventually Reggie is released and he immediately visits Frances. He climbs to her window and gives her a ring as he asks her to marry him. Frances will only accept if he promises to go clean, and Reggie swears to do so on his honor. Afterward, the couple goes to the club and Reggie is shocked to find it mostly empty. Leslie tells him that Ron has ruined things and the place will crash next week when the tax bill comes. A furious Reggie starts yelling at Ron and an argument ensues. When Frances tries to defend Reggie, Ron insults her as well. Reggie finally snaps and throws his brother on a table. The twins start fighting, brutally hurting each other with any object they can find and even drawing blood. Ron has had lots of practice in prison and manages to overpower Ron, leaving him bleeding on the floor. Frances is disgusted by all this violence and leaves the club. A crying Ron brings Reggie down for a hug, explaining how sometimes he doesn't feel like himself. The next day Reggie goes after Frances and convinces her to give him another chance. In the meantime, Nipper has started to follow Ron instead of Reggie and takes lots of pictures. However, Ron starts making friends with various members of the House of Parliament and invites them to his apartment, where he throws parties with young men who are hired to please the old politicians. The police can't arrest him without getting important people involved too, so the higher-ups cover everything up and Ron continues to be safe. Reggie shows Frances a club in the West End, which he wants to buy to look like a proper businessman again. The owner agrees to sell 50% of the club and Reggie knows he can get the rest later. Ron is afraid that he may lose his relationship with Reggie, so he sends Teddy to intimidate the club owner to try to stop the deal. Teddy starts breaking things at the bar, so the owner cancels the deal but also calls the police. Both twins are then charged with extortion, and when Frances visits Reggie in prison, she makes a big announcement: she'll only marry him if he's found innocent. A few days later, a picture of Ron with a politician ends up in the newspaper and the government rushes to cover it all up. This includes getting the twins out of jail and getting an innocent verdict. Reggie ends up buying the whole club at a discount that same night. When Nipper enters the club to investigate, Reggie mocks him, pointing out that technically Nipper works for him because he's under orders of his politician friends. The twins take a picture with Nipper and send it to the police captain, who orders Nipper to stop investigating the craze. Sometime later, Reggie and Frances finally get married. Her mother still disapproves and wears black as if it was a funeral. Before the wedding, she tries to talk her daughter out of it, but Frances ignores her. Ron notices that Frances' mother doesn't sing during the ceremony and calls her out in front of everyone. Although Reggie promised to stay clean, this doesn't last long. 2 weeks after the wedding, he's already doing dirty business again. This keeps him away from home a lot, and Frances is tired of sleeping alone. She realizes her husband really likes being a gangster after all. Frances tries to bond with Ron and his parents, but they criticize everything she does because they don't think she's good enough for Reggie. To make matters worse, Nipper has started to follow her. To deal with all this, Frances starts taking too much medicine and becomes an addict. When Jack makes another mistake, Reggie enjoys getting to beat him up. He also buys a car from Frances to keep her happy, but he still turns her down when she asks him to spend time together. One afternoon at the pub, Leslie tells Reggie that he needs to start thinking about his future with a family and may become clean for real. Ron is furious to hear this and hits Leslie with a bottle, even throwing a few glasses while the men take the lawyer to the hospital. Reggie starts yelling at his brother and realizes he hasn't been taking his medicine, which explains why he's been more volatile lately. Sometime later, the American gangster talks to Reggie in private to ask him to do something about Ron. It's dangerous for him to appear in public with politicians and he's become a loose cannon. However, Reggie refuses to let his brother down. When he gets home, he doesn't even say hi to Francis. In the meantime, George is trying to work on his own after the torture gang broke up. He enters the Krays' territory and beats up the owner of an important warehouse. The next day the man asks Ron for protection, so Ron goes on a rant about people who suck at their jobs and agrees to kill George if the warehouse owner pays him well. That night, Ron enters a pub and shoots George in the head right in front of everyone. Later at home, Reggie tries to yell at Ron for what he did, but he can't because their mother may hear. He quietly orders Teddy to get rid of the clothes and gun that Ron used at the pub. He also asks Albie to look for every witness to find out if they went to the police. Before leaving, Reggie leaves the medicine bottle and tries to remind Ron to take it. The next day Francis asks Reggie to let Ron go to jail, but Reggie refuses and is disappointed to realize that Francis is an addict now. At Scotland Yard, Nipper is given permission to open an official investigation on the Krays, using George's murder as a basis. Ron is called for a police lineup, but none of the witness identifies him because they're too scared of the gang. Francis grows more frustrated every day because the gang starts to hang out at her house and people on the street don't want to talk to her while she's with Reggie. He even confirms that he threatened the witnesses to avoid trouble. One afternoon it starts raining and Francis runs outside to try to close her car, but she's struggling. Instead of helping her, Reggie mocks her because she only has the car thanks to his illegal activities. He shakes the car and insults her, so Francis slaps him and goes back inside. A furious Reggie follows her and throws her around the room before taking advantage of her and beating her up. The next day Francis finally leaves for good. Ron finds her on her way out and helps her with her suitcases while talking about the situation. He's happy to see her go, but at the same time he doesn't approve of his brother hitting her because that's not how their parents raised them. Francis kisses his cheek as thanks and Ron says he's always liked her. A few weeks later Reggie tries to visit Francis, but Frank doesn't want to let him in. An argument ensues, so Francis interrupts them and agrees to hear Reggie out. He begs her to come back and swears he's changed. However, Francis doesn't believe him and goes back to her family home. Afterward Francis realizes she'll never escape this hell and takes enough medicine to self-delete. Frank finds the body and calls Reggie, who returns to say his final goodbye and put the wedding ring back on her finger. During the funeral, Francis' mother blames Reggie for her daughter's death. One night at the club, Ron hires Jack to kill Leslie. Jack goes to the lawyer's house, but when Leslie opens the door, he doesn't shoot fast enough. Leslie starts fighting him for the gun and in the struggle, he gets shot in the leg. Jack uses the opening to run and Leslie opens fire, but Jack is already gone in his car. In the morning, Nipper visits Leslie at the hospital and gets him to talk by promising to protect his family. A few hours later, Reggie learns from his spies that Leslie told Nipper everything and even gave him documents. All the people who saw George die were given witness protection, so they agreed to talk too. That night Ron throws a party at his house and Reggie attends because he's hungry for revenge. As soon as Jack arrives, Reggie starts yelling at him for ruining their business. Jack asks Ron for help, but Ron won't protect him. Then Jack insults Reggie for what happened to Francis, so Reggie pulls out a gun and tries to shoot him in the head, but he has no bullets. When Jack tries to run away, Reggie grabs a knife and viciously stabs him multiple times until he dies in front of all the guests. Ron asks Reggie why he did this and Reggie explains he killed Jack because he can't kill his own brother, no matter how much he wants to. After putting the knife in Ron's pocket, Reggie leaves. Albie follows him out to scold him for his actions, but Reggie just punches him and walks away. Thanks to all the witnesses at the party, the police finally have enough evidence to arrest the twins and ignore their influence with the parliament. This is based on the real story of the Kray twins. Reggie spent 33 years in prison and was released on compassionate grounds 2 weeks before his death in 2000. He died of cancer at 66. Ron was declared insane and sent to a mental hospital again, where he died at 61 of a heart attack in 1995. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.